Conventions are fun, but everybody wants to do crossovers. I just don't know. Who are you and what are you doing here?
Greetings, Linkara.
You didn't answer my question. We just sat down here looking at your camera.
Well, it's better for the viewers that way. But also, I have a proposition for you. You like comic books, I like video games. Why don't we review a series of comics based on a video game?
Pokemon?
Not exactly. Although I will say this game has fantastic atmosphere and mood, and generally conveys its source material very accurately.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Alright, then, let us dig into Killer7, the comic books.
Both Devil's Due Publishing and Kinetic Underground worked together to produce these comics under Image. In 2001, it revamped G.I. Joe into a comic book series, rekindling interest in the characters. The series' success allowed Devil's Due to start working on other series, to the point where it was able to break off of Image and become its own independent company. Some of its projects include Hack Slash, Forgotten Realms, and two Army of Darkness miniseries.
Kinetic Underground is a design and marketing company, and has worked with all sorts of companies like Hasbro, Disney, and in this case, Capcom. While they happens to work on publishing comic books in this case, they serve other industries, such as electronics and toys. In fact, there was going to be a line of resin Killer7 figures, but that project was cancelled. They did, however, release some translucent red Dan Smith figures at San Diego Comic-Con in 2005 and on devilsdue.net back then, but those are extremely difficult to find now. But enough about figures. It's time to get into the comic books. We'll start with the pre-order bonus that you got if you had ordered Killer7 early from Electronics Boutique. Issue number 0.
The cover is crowded. Everything is jammed together, I'm not sure what the hell we're looking at, and of course, while the cell shading matches the games, the lack of distinct inking lines creates a bit of a problem for distinguishing characters. Admittedly, I've never played Killer7, so I have no idea who these people are, but we have a guy on top who appears to have another guy coming out of his face, which might very well be a character, except down below, because of the bad inking lines, we have a black guy coming out of a white guy, so they could also be conjoined together. I'm not sure. The thing with two heads.
Now, as it happens, the face in the upper middle is Harmon Smith, the boss. Though he plays a very important role, he's actually not one of the Killer7, so technically only 4 of the 7 are present. Now, Masked Smith is one of the ones present. The man in the lower middle is Garcian Smith, and Dan Smith is on the lower right. The face next to Harmon's is, I assume, Kaede Smith. It's kind of hard to tell. I would have actually guessed that it might be Dan, except that Dan is clearly in the lower corner. If it's not her, then maybe because the faces are melding into each other and covered under the hat, it's a young version of Harmon? I mean, that's an unlock for the Killer 8 game, but hey, I didn't write the comics. It's especially tricky because only Garcian and Dan are actually in this issue. It's true that this is a promotional issue, so it's best to show off a large cast of characters, and you can switch among the Smiths at will in the game, but this comic only features the opening cutscenes, which involve only 2 of the 5 people present on the cover.
The story's title is Devil Have Mercy, Part 1. We open to a shot of the Washington Monument and Garcian Smith walking past it in what the text box tells us is the 10th anniversary of Global Unification Day. He then walks through an alley past a mysterious man who slips him an object labeled K7. K7, what could that refer to? Something Street Fighter related, maybe?
I figured it was a downgrade from K9.
We next see him in his trailer house in the middle of a phone conversation with the man who passed him in the alley about an upcoming mission. It seems that he's going up against his strange enemies who are different. They eat their bread butter side down.
Those monsters.
The goal is to infiltrate the Celtic Arms building and kill everyone in it, except for their leader, who will be taken for questioning. May the Lord smile.
And may the devil have mercy. This set of scenes follows the game almost exactly, right down to the dialogue. There are only a few differences. First, we get the name of the man whom Garcian passed on the street. It's Christopher Mills. Also, Garcian is not carrying his usual long suitcase like in the game, and his phone conversation is occurring in his trailer house instead of moments after the note was passed. In the game, Garcian received a call only a few steps later when he crossed the street and got to a sidewalk. Honestly, the comic version makes more sense. If Mills was standing right there, then why not talk to him in person instead of call him on a phone moments later? At least the trailer house implies that time went by, so there's no way that the two men are anywhere near each other, and it's less likely that the call will be noticed. That said, in both versions, it's strange that this is being done over a phone, as we'll find that Mills much prefers to speak face-to-face, where prying ears can't listen. Also, on a minor note, the comic opened by telling us that it's Global Unification Day in Washington, D.C. Both the comic and the game start us in media res, but the game didn't even give us the context of D.C., nor did it tell us anything about Global Unification Day. That information comes later.
We then see Garcian approaching the Celtic Arms building. As he goes up the stairs, we see him look into the security camera, and then a strange thing happens. He turns into a different person as the camera watches. Incidentally, the camera is splattered with blood, as is the wall around the new man, who we've established is Dan Smith. Dan continues on his way, but when he nears a door, someone bursts through it, shouting that everyone's dead. Hi.
Sup, dude?
It appears that Dan isn't the most polite guy around. After Dan asks what happened to the guard, the man, mid-explanation, transforms into a strange creature before Dan's eyes and lunges. I have been chosen! After months of working overtime, I have been chosen to be Employee of the Month! Dan quickly aims and fires, blowing the monster into bloody chunks. The bastards are breeding. Keep one alive. Great, going up. Is the game normally that violent?
Not exactly. The game has blood everywhere, and blood is in fact a game mechanic, as your characters spend it for upgrades and performing special moves. While some cutscenes do show violence in an ugly manner, killing enemies shows blood in such a way that it doesn't really register as blood. I'd also like to point out that this scene plays out exactly the way it does in the game, with two exceptions. Dan actually speaks a lot more in the comic. He never even opens his mouth until after he kills the Smile, and even after that, he just says the line about how those bastards are breeding, and then ascends the stairs silently. The other difference is that the Smile revealed its true form after walking past Dan, so instead of registering shock and being quick on the draw, Dan simply turns around and puts a bullet in his head without emoting at all. It's actually very unlike Dan to show any kind of expression other than confident neutrality.
That's it for issue number 0. This is where it's to be continued.
This was continued in issue 1/2, a 2005 San Diego Comic-Con promotional exclusive, and if what I found on the internet is to be believed, only 5,000 issues were printed. Let's take a look at it. It actually contains all of the content of issue number 0 and moves right along with the new material. As Dan goes up the stairs, he switches to Coyote Smith. As was the case with Dan, before Coyote can say a word, someone runs out to him. Help me! Coyote expresses his confusion, and then suddenly a Smile grabs the man and self-destructs. Blorsh. What interests me is Coyote's pleading for the Smile to stop. That seems different from his video game persona of being a hardened criminal.
For that reason, Coyote then immediately transforms into Kaede, the sniper of the group. She takes out a few Smiles, does a stomp attack on one of their heads before shooting at some more, and somehow does a gigantic backflip, landing just as the creature explodes.
Going up even more stairs, she switches to Masked Smith, the muscle of the group. Yet another person comes out and is attacked by a Smile. However, she survives and crawls half-transformed, begging Max to kill her. He silently grants her wish. Finally, he opens a fire exit door and shifts into the head of the Syndicate, Harmon Smith. The comic ends with Harmon confronting a strange angelic being, who asks him why he persecutes her children.
So what exactly was the point of including issue 0 in the 1/2 issue?
Yeah, I was kind of wondering that myself. As was mentioned, issue 0 was a pre-order bonus, so I guess that would give you a taste of what the game had to bring to the table. But if you ever wanted to buy the actual comic books that were released in the mainstream, then issue 1 skips way ahead. You just don't have the content of issue 1/2. Now, I understand that issue 1/2 was a super special exclusive, but very few people actually got that. So really, even if you did want to have a special issue 1/2, having the redundant content of issue 0 really does seem pointless.
So what I'm hearing here is that issue 0 and issue 1/2 have no reason to exist. Why did we just spend all this time talking about them?
Because variant covers and marketing?
Therefore, we will move on to issue number 1. It actually has 2 variant covers. The normal cover, despite a boring, featureless background, manages to be interesting in that it features all 7 members of the Killer 7, as well as Harmon, and their poses and expressions actually make sense regarding their characters. We have Harmon, Mask, Dan, and Garcian Smith running along the top, and for the new members, we have Kevin Smith, seriously, with the white hair in the middle left, Kaede Smith on the lower left, Coyote Smith in the lower center, and the small guy with the bandana over his eyes is Con Smith. A lot of Smiths. But who's the guy with the third eye?
Yeah, about that, I'm not going to say. Believe it or not, it's a major endgame spoiler, and I have no freaking clue why he's featured here, as this comic accurately follows the game, and this only concerns the second level.
Okay then. As to the variant cover, it's a bit more dynamic, but it's also just Mask and Garcian with guns shooting things while red glass shards explode everywhere. Probably cutting them up, but good. Our story here is Sunset Part 1, Blood Overture, where we get a lot of exposition about all international disputes resolving, forming Global Unification Day, though that name isn't actually mentioned here. Everything's going great. Everything nuclear has been banned and disposed of. Yeah, that can create some problems in some countries. And the world is working on eliminating intercontinental missiles next. So apparently we've got the plot of Superman 4 here. I guess we did want peace enough this time. However, there also exists Heaven Smiles, those creepy human-like creatures who are effectively living bombs.
It may be a clunky textual presentation, but this is pretty much how the game started, though that version featured a voiceover. Even the timing makes sense, and this works great for the comics. If you didn't read the promotional issue, and you'd be missing out if you didn't, unfortunately, then you open to direct information on the setting and plot, though showing and not telling might have been better appreciated. If you did read the promotional comic, then you're getting the information in the order that the game gives it to you. You get all of this in exposition after the first level. So yes, the promotional comic actually was supposed to have information that we did not yet understand. If that sounds weird to you, that's because it is. But the game did the same thing. I play some weird video games. Next, we see the president about to read a story to children as a publicity stunt when he's informed that a Heaven Smile detonated, killing the Secretary General, and evidence suggests that Japan is responsible, despite Japan being America's ally.
Technically, everyone is each other's ally right now. That's what global unification means.
But Japan's really America's ally, I guess. In order to deal with the threat without making an international scene, and more importantly, because the Heaven Smile was a junior member of the US delegation, and therefore inside men cannot be trusted, it is suggested that they call up the Killer 7. Cut to the highway where Garcian and Mills meet, and this time they're introduced by name in yellow boxes. Mills says,
Whoa. Is that a friggin' Umbrella Corporation truck down there?
Wow. Yes, it is. That's not in the game, but it is an amusing little nod, as both Resident Evil and Killer 7 are Capcom titles, and in addition, Shinji Mikami, the creator of Resident Evil, is one of Killer 7's producers. That said, despite this cameo, this is about Heaven Smiles. They may be monsters, but don't let their sharp teeth fool you. They don't bite, and they're not infected with the T-virus.
Except clearly the Umbrella Corporation exists here, so connection?
It's more likely than you think. Hey, I'll take it. At least it's not Boxhead from The Evil Within.
Anyway, Mills sets up Garcian with his mission, which is to hit up Restaurant Fukushima and take out the owner, who is the middleman between the American government and Rising Wind of Japan. Garcian then returns to his trailer house and hears a mysterious message on his answering machine about voting for the Republican Party.
Actually, in the comic and the game, it's Republic Party. Apparently, politics have changed since the ones we were used to. I really don't understand why they did this. Remember how I said that Mills doesn't like talking on the phone? Well, he has to contact Garcian somehow, and this is how he does it. His voice is very distinctive, and in the game, when you hear this message, it's obviously him, and you'll hear his same message throughout the game.
Hello, Mr. Smith. The election is drawing near. Have you decided on your vote? If you haven't, please let the Republic Party make the most of your precious vote. Thank you, and have a nice day.
It's a signal to meet Mills by the bridge so they can talk business. Here, though, Garcian receives the message after they talk business, and then he moves on with heading to Harmon. It raises two questions. How did he know to talk to males back then, and what are we supposed to make of this message if we see nothing done about it? People unfamiliar with the game would just assume that Garcian received a normal solicitation message and think nothing of it.
We then meet an unpleasant character, Samantha Sitbon. She's slapping Harmon around until Garcian turns on the lights, at which point she instantly becomes respectful and is wearing a maid's uniform somehow. Yeah, Samantha's a strange character. She has two personalities, and flicking the light switch appears to trigger them.
In fact, when you go to a Harmon room in the game, they'll all serve as refuel and respawn points, but whether or not the lights are on does matter. If everything's dark, then Samantha will be calm and in uniform and you can save the game. If the lights are on, then she'll be dressed casually and lounging on a chair, and so saving is not an option. Anyway, Harmon gives Garcian some tips about the mission. The lights go back on and Samantha goes back to being a snarky student. We then meet one of the weirder characters around. And considering who we met already, that's saying a lot. Iwazaru. Dressed up in a gimp suit, complete with ball gag, this guy is the Killer7's informant. There's an amusing little quirk here. His eyes are sewn shut, his suit covers his ears, and he has his finger to his lips, implying, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Anyway, he descends from the sky and gives tips. One thing the comic doesn't express is the unique way in which he talks. Take a listen.
This time, let us be adapters. Let us be adapters.
Anyone who talks with a distorted voice such as this, you'll find, is not only dead, but also a former target of the Killer7. We don't know why, but for whatever reason, it seems that the Killer7 killed this man sometime in the past. Now he works for them.
So the Killer7 did not kill somebody, they just sewed his eyes shut.
No, that's the strange thing. They did kill him. I do not know why his eyes are sewn shut. And I beat the game.
Next, we finally get to the restaurant. Garcian is about to be admitted, but when the door opens, he's no longer there and is replaced by Masked Smith, just like Dan appeared in the previous issue. He is honest with the greeters, telling them that he is there to kill Mr. Fukushima, and when they turn into smiles, he fires his weapons, twin grenade launchers, and tears the place apart. Oh. Well, that was a violent reaction to him saying he was going to kill someone. How very rude of this restaurant.
But hey, at least they ended the things with a bang. Ow.
To be continued.
They'd better hurry up with this. Sunset is indeed a two-part mission in the game, but Mask blowing up the entrance is the very beginning of the first part. Then again, the comic has little reason to show the puzzle-solving elements of the game, so when it comes down to story, it shouldn't take anywhere nearly as long to read as it does to play.
I should point out that of the four main issues in the series, this is the only one not to have a variant cover. What it does have, though, is Mask fighting off a ton of smiles climbing all over him. Strange, as they normally detonate with a touch, but I guess the cover wouldn't be as action-packed if the smiles were all standing at arm's length. You know, for creatures called smiles, I'm not seeing a lot of smiling.
Yeah, about that. They smile all the time in the game. I don't know, artistic license, I guess.
Also, a mysterious woman with a gun is in the background, watching the action take place. The art style of the smiles is bizarre, but there's a lot of action to be had here, as well as the restaurant providing an appropriate atmospheric background. We open to a smile laughing, and then getting his head stomped on by Mask.
From the way it's drawn, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but stomping actually is how Mask can take out a downed enemy if he's close enough. Nice touch. We have a dynamic panel of Mask standing on its head amid flaming wreckage with the title, Sunset Part 2, to mock a killing bird. Yeah, I don't get it either.
Ah, to mock a killing bird, my favorite story, alongside The Wrath of Grapes.
The next 3 pages are nothing but Mask fighting off smiles, so I guess the cover was doing the comic justice after all.
After that, he blows open an entrance to a kitchen where the chef is, needless to say, startled by the masked wrestler who just blew up the whole damn building with an endless barrage of grenades. You so much as giggle and I'll set you on fire. Jeez, dude, relax. Everyone else turned into a smile already. I think if this guy was one, he would have turned already. Then the chef explains that he's cleaning up, while explosions are tearing the building apart. Whatever this guy's being paid, it isn't enough. Mask lets him go, telling him to get out of here. It seems, though, that the chef recognizes Mask. He addresses him with a strange line. I thought you were dead, man. You were the greatest wrestler of all time. What happened? Mask gives a cryptic line about a career change, then leaves.
Oh, no, they took it out!
What?
The greatest scene in the entire game. They just took it out. It's not there.
Took what out?
Take a look.
What's in your right hand, Chico?
Please don't. This is just a...
Put your arms down!
No, it's not like that. This gun is a...
Don't move, amigo!
Please, don't shoot!
Stay still!
Ah!
Damn!
He headbutted a freaking bullet! The man fired a bullet in his head, and he responded by using his head to hit the bullet back. And his head was the stronger of the two! That said, I'm not surprised by his power, but rather his reaction speed. His power was established in the game already. I didn't say anything earlier, but while in the comic, Garcian simply walked to the front door, Mask had to make himself a path.
Seriously?
Yeah, man, the chef wasn't kidding. He really was the greatest wrestler of all time.
Awesome.
His business here is about concluded, though. He leaves the main building and heads to a smaller one across a bridge, turns into Garcian, and meets the mysterious woman we saw on the cover. She leads Garcian to Fukushima, who exposits about how he's one of the 7 survivors of the Battle of Okinawa in World War II. He figured that because he lived in a situation where he should have died, it was a sign that God was telling him that Japan should rise again. So he founded the Rising Wind Party, which, again, is likely the source of the smile that detonated in America, bringing the Killer7 here in the first place. He concludes by saying that while Japan has played the servant for the last 60 years, it would soon rise up and claim its place as the ruler again. It seems that God gave the 7 survivors the secret of something called the Yakumo. Before he can explain what it is, he's shot in the head and killed instantly.
Well, goodbye, dude. You served your purpose in the story.
Didn't have a lasting impression, but at least we got to say hi.
It's the woman from before. As it turns out, she was a different assassin sent to kill Fukushima. She effectively did Garcian's job for him. However, she wants him to hand over the Yakumo. Upon learning that Garcian doesn't know what it is, she bites her necklace, which has a miniature bomb in it, and kills herself.
Well, she may have only had a brief appearance in the game, but at least she went out. Not exactly the boss fight in the game, is it? In that, health wasn't an issue. The winner was determined by who landed more hits than the other in a set period of time. Anyway, after this, Garcian gets a call from Mills, who informs him that in addition to the assassin who just died in front of Garcian, there was yet another one sent in, but to protect Fukushima. It's the cook from before, and his name is Jean de Paul. If this sounds overly complicated, that's because it is. Nothing can be done with that information as de Paul has already left, but the next mission can start later in the next issue.
This cover is also busy, but there is no unwasted space. That said, it could actually stand to use a little less of its space. There's so much on the page that the eye has little room to relax. Also, none of the people featured on the cover show up at any point in the comic. The variant is a man with an afro wearing a yellow Texas Bronco t-shirt, standing in a pious-looking pose on top of a building. This one's interesting in that it does a lot with a little. It's not action-packed like the previous issue was, but it shows what it needs to show without any unnecessary fanfare.
This issue's title is Torah, Torah, Torah. No, not the Jewish holy text. Torah is Japanese for tiger, but more importantly, it being used 3 times in a row like that is a reference to the American-Japanese war film of the same name, which dramatizes the attack on Pearl Harbor. The film bears this name because during the war, Torah was a code word, a sort of acronym for Totsugeki Raigeki, which literally means lightning attack, but was used to indicate that surprise had been achieved. All of this is a nod to the overall plot of Killer7, as there are strong hints that Japan may strike at America once again.
We open to Garcian finding 4 men killed at a game of mahjong. It turns out that one of them is barely alive though, and before dying, he manages to tell Garcian to go to the roof to find what he seeks. Cut to 2 older men and 1 younger one, 3 members of the Rising Wind. The younger one, Kenjiro Matsuoka, gets fed up with the old men's prattling and kills them. Before finishing himself off, we see what is perhaps the main villain of the series, Kunlan. It seems that he has a job for Matsuoka. No doubt he wants him to kidnap Garcian so they can play a game of mahjong that doesn't end in people being shot. As if all of these situations weren't complicated enough, Mask finds and kills DePaul. Oh, glad that was resolved, I guess.
We then go to one of the more dissonant parts of this comic, in terms of matching its source material. Mask enters the room with the corpses, but unlike in the game, Matsuoka and Kunlan are still there. Mask blows up the old man's smile forms immediately, which makes me wish the real boss battle was that easy. And then after turning into Garcian, we get a strange conversation between Harmon and Kun Lan. Harmon is aware that Kun Lan is responsible for the rising wind and the bombing in the States. A new generation will bring order to this age. My children.
Nothing has changed. No matter how many times you try, the result will be the same.
The world is changing. Changing to the size where you can control it with your hands, just like a PDA.
But with better handwriting recognition.
Ooh, nice.
Harmon breaks out a freaking anti-tank rifle and fires it at Kun Lan, but misses, after which Kun Lan flies away.
The conversation is very similar to that of the first game, but is taking place at the end of Mission 2, while in the game it took place after the first mission, the one that Issue 0 and 1/2 covered. Also, Harmon's shot was handled in a much cooler manner in the game. Now that that's all resolved, Garcian prepares for his next mission. He gets a tip that Matsuoka is now the head of the Rising Wind, as all the other members are dead. So I guess what is he really the head of in that case? And he's supposed to carry out the plans to destroy the United States. In addition, a man named Andre Almeida knows something about the Yakumo, and while normally sensitive information like that would get him killed, for some reason the Rising Wind is afraid of him. Looks like it's time for Garcian to head to Texas to meet the Texas Bronco. The comic ends with Almeida talking over a TV channel to give a shout-out from the Lord to the Lord. Praise the Lord! Praise the Lord! It's a nice teaser for what's to come, but if you'll allow me to get nitpicky...
Too late.
I'd like to point out that while Almeida does tout a new religion, he's its central focus, as opposed to a deity. He never actually says praise the Lord here.
Well, we have time for one more issue, I guess, and that's issue number 4. It has a variant cover, but interestingly enough, both covers feature Coyote Smith fighting one or more Smileys while falling down a building. The first cover has Coyote jumping through the glass window of a tavern away from several Smiles, while the variant cover has him jumping or falling down, but aiming his gun up at either a Smile that looks big due to the angle it's drawn in, or perhaps one of the giant Smiles from the third level of the game. Intentional reference or bad art? You make the call! The building he's falling through looks like a scaffolding made of bamboo this time. Not sure why there's a can of paint there, as there's nothing to paint, unless the construction workers want a lot of white bamboo. While Coyote's color scheme is similar to that of the first issue, it's interesting that the pattern on his shirt, as well as his belt buckle, have changed from cover to cover.
Our story is called Welcome to Paradise. Interesting, as the game's title for this mission is Cloudman. That said, the comic's title does make sense, as we'll find out. We open right where we left off, with Garcian watching Almeida on TV. It seems that something bad is going to happen to the Spike Girls concert going on in the background. I guess as a take on the Spice Girls.
Or just people who were very enthusiastic about Spike from Buffy and Angel.
In the game it was called a Stacy concert. Can't say I know why they changed the name, but it's a little consequence. Almeida seems to get a little too turned on by his religion, as his speech comes to its climax, so to speak. It's emphasized with an actual explosion behind him. For a better illustration of what I'm talking about, check out the game's depiction of this event.
But this Stacy they love, she's an illusion. But in the new age, there's no fooling them, no sir. They won't be tricked by illusions anymore. Oh my God, I can't hold back. Oh God, I'm coming. Yeah! Woo! See, I told you, this is real.
Wow.
It's even more amusing when you realize he's voiced by Cam Clark, the guy who did Leonardo in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
This guy looks like he's bad news. After this display, he directly calls Garcian out. Well, it's a good thing Garcian was heading to him anyway.
Yeah, that played out nicely. In the game, Garcian wasn't directed toward Almeida at first. The level opens with Almeida on TV, and that's what points Garcian in that direction. Also, Garcian saw the display in his trailer house rather than at a diner in public.
Speaking of which, the next thing we see is Garcian talking to Harmon in the trailer house. Harmon informs him that Almeida is a terrorist, but a particularly powerful one, as his company, First Life Corporation, is worth billions and growing rapidly. Garcian notes that Almeida is supposed to know what the Yakumo is, and Kun Lan seems to as well. I love how there's an asterisk that leads to a footnote that tells us to buy, steal, read the first 3 issues to know what he's talking about. Comics do this sort of thing all the time, but the footnotes usually refer to comics that are part of another series, something the reader really might not know about if he were just reading a single particular series in numerical order. However, Killer7 doesn't connect to any other series, and if you're reading issue number 4, chances are you've read the previous 3 issues. Even if you hadn't, shouldn't it be common knowledge that a sequential story wouldn't be a standalone thing? Hell, issues 2 and 3 never told us to refer back to previous issues, so why start now? Anyway, as for what the Yakumo is, even Harmon doesn't know, but it looks like Garcian is heading to Texas.
Texas? The t-shirt. Nobody wears a t-shirt that says Texas Bronco, except in Texas.
Huh?
Time to head south by southeast.
We next see Garcian in Almeida City, where a local informs him that he's not personally a fan of Almeida, as the man says he can cure any disease with his blood, but it ain't natural. Garcian had apparently better watch himself, as the people of the town will do anything to protect Almeida. It looks like the Killer7 are wading through enemy territory. Garcian then turns into Coyote Smith. He makes a high leap over a barbed wire fence, which actually does justice to his character in the game. Coyote's special ability allows him to reach high places that none of the other Smiths can access, and in this level in particular, he has a lot of opportunities to make use of this, as there are rooftops that need to be checked.
Coyote is immediately greeted with what are known as Almeida Smiles, cult members wearing Almeida's Texas Bronco shirt. They go down easily enough, but then a human cult member denounces Coyote for killing the Master's servants. Coyote responds by pistol whipping him and threatening more harm unless he tells him where Almeida is. The cultist then turns into a giant smile, staring at Coyote with a single laser-shooting eye.
While the conversation does not happen in the game, the Almeida and Giant Smiles are indeed enemies that run around the place, so it's nice to see the comics finally referencing specific enemies. From a gameplay standpoint, this is one of the more accurate comics in terms of interacting with enemies. For even more gameplay references, Coyote jumps high in the air and targets the Giant's weak spot. It's single eye. You think he's a relative of Polyphemus?
Coyote then bursts into a room with a normal human and demands once more to know where Almeida is. Fortunately, the woman here is more receptive than the cultists outside. She, like the farmer from the beginning, is not a fan of Almeida, wondering how a lowlife like him could create the massive First Life Corporation. As it turns out, reaching Almeida should be easy. He's just on the other side of a concrete bunker down the street.
Then we get one more surprisingly specific accurate reference. Iwazaro shows up again. It's not so much his showing up as it is the way he speaks. He opens with, "Master, this is harsh," before giving his mission tip, and closes with, "In the name of Harmon," before ascending back into the sky, whence he came. That's always how Iwazaro did things in the game. He pops in, has his quirky manner of speech, and leaves. Anyway, he reminds Coyote one more time that Almeida has an important clue about the Yakumo and the Heaven Smiles, and leaves with a warning. We knew this already, but Almeida is not someone to be trifled with. We get one final gameplay reference when Coyote picks the lock to the door to the bunker. His lockpicking ability is invaluable in the game.
He sees the First Life skyscraper on the other side, and as he approaches it, it tips over and shatters. Yeah, if you look closely, you see that it's a cardboard prop held by a wooden stand. The building was fake all along. And so our comic ends, with Coyote marveling at what's just gone down, figuratively and literally. So what's the next issue?
Actually, there is no next issue. The comic series was discontinued at this point. It was originally intended to be 12 issues long, delivered in 2 6-issue arcs, but the series was cancelled before even the first arc could be completed. We won't get to see the confrontation with Almeida in written form. It looks like the reason he challenged Garcian will have to remain a mystery.
Too bad, I was really starting to get into the story, whatever it was.
Yeah, you know about that. It's actually really accurate to the game story. And I don't know if that's supposed to be a compliment or a backhanded compliment or what, but it really did a better job than I thought it would. I played the game years ago, back when it came out on the GameCube and the PS2, and while the story was incredibly complicated, it was the kind that made me think, there's no possible way you could adapt this into any medium with the possible exception of a movie. So written form? Actually better than I thought. All things considered, though, it's probably better that they stopped where they did. The comics have been very faithful to the game, so I have little reason to believe that they wouldn't continue their pattern. Assuming that the story were to continue as normal, the Almeida fight would probably take up a small portion of issue 5, and then we'd meet the villain of the 4th mission, and boy is that guy bad news. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if the comics were discontinued just so the writers wouldn't have to put this guy to paper.
bad could it be? He made it to a video game after all. Besides, I've seen my share of crazy stuff in comics.
Well, it is true that even the game doesn't show anything really explicit with this guy, but as to who he is, he's a murderer who rounds up female orphans and he harvests their organs on the black market. Those whose organs he has not yet harvested, he rapes. Those whose organs he has harvested, he stuffs their body, taxidermy style, and hangs them in his house. I play some weird video games.
What does he do with kittens?
Actually, he donates all he can to the local animal shelter. He's a pretty stand-up guy, all other things considered.
Huh.
Yeah, not many comic collectors are going to want to read about that.
Unless you're DC in the New 52.
Whether for that reason or for some other, the issues stop here. However, all is not lost. If you want to discover what happens next in the story, as well as who the other Smiths are and how they operate, as well as the resolution to Kunlan's involvement in the plot, then you'll have to play the game, which, by the way, I highly recommend. Its aesthetics and gameplay are unconventional, but the final product is a masterpiece.
These comics are not really all that bad, just really kind of dull, and the story is rather convoluted and doesn't resolve, but that's not the fault of the comics themselves, but rather that they were cut off prematurely. As it's an adaptation rather than a completely original work, its writing, with the exception of a few liberties taken, comes from its source material, and these issues do a good job of recapturing the game's original effect. It's a shame, though, as we only got to meet half of the Smiths, as the issues' covers certainly like to tease the rest, including that mysterious man with the third eye that Lotus refuses to talk about.
Yeah, for that too, you'll need to play the game. The other Smiths all have the same goal, though they may have differing personalities, but the very identity of the three-eyed man is a plot spoiler. So I'll leave that revelation to anyone who chooses to watch a Let's Play of the game, or better yet, play the game themselves.
Thanks for watching, everyone, and have a Merry Christmas!
It's late January.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Alright, then, let us dig into Killer7, the comic books.
That doesn't sound very Pokemon-y.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot more violence.